this edition of the Saturday Science Circle presentation. We are doing a slightly different format than our usual presentation or debate as we have now. We are going to have a panel discussion on revisiting some of the interesting talks from 2020. So 5 years ago, a nice time to reflect, look back. But let's face it, 2020 was also a particularly interesting, consequential year, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to go back to. And then Science Circle was very active that year. You can look on our YouTube channel. We have a plethora of videos that are interesting from the time. So today's format, I have asked each prior speaker to give a short update, or sorry, a reminder of what their talk was about, and then a short update, and then basically open it up for conversation and questions for each one. And we'll try and stick to an equal amount of time for each speaker. We'll go in the order you see here. We will start with Delia Lake, who was Linda Morris Kelly in real life, and then we'll have William Wall, who is Syzygy Asymptote here in Second Life, and then third will be Robert, who is Robert Hendricks, who is Tagline here. So, with that being said, I hope everyone's ready to settle in. And if you have any questions you want me as moderator to ask of the panel, please shoot me an IM. I will also be keeping an eye on local chat, but again, we'll let the speakers give their little updates first, and then go from there and kind of have it open and loose, but hopefully a lot of fun. So, Delia, take it away.
Okay, thank you, and welcome everybody. I'm glad to see you here today. So I'm going to start with a question. What did you all have for breakfast? Use chat if you really feel moved to speak. Go ahead and speak. What did you have for breakfast today? Okay. So we have a variety of things here. Yeah. So I had French toast, egg toast with maple syrup. So my next question is, where'd your food come from for breakfast? Do you know? The store. Yeah. So isn't that interesting? Here we are, a group of people who have spent a good part of our lives either as scientists practicing or scientists in orientation, where we apply the curiosity and the observation and the critical thinking in various scientific fields. And food, which is one of the most important parts of our daily lives, we don't really know. Where did it come from? So I was in that state many years ago, and I have spent time working on that for myself, and I invite each of you, because this isn't a blaming or a right and wrong, but it is because food is so important to our health and our well-being as human beings, that we have a lot of skills that we could apply to improving not only our own health and our family's health, and well-being, but that of our community and really that of our region. So let me tell you my breakfast here. Again, I had the French toast, the egg toast, and local maple syrup, and coffee with half and half. So where mine came from, the eggs came from a farm north of me, and I am very, very lucky that I live in a rural area, a small city in a rural area, where I can actually do this. But it's not impossible to do it in a city either. So I know where the eggs came from, and I know the chickens that laid them. And my half and half came from a dairy farm south of me, where I go every week and get some half and half and cheese. The bread came from a local baker, but I don't know where the ingredients for the bread, where he got the ingredients, and that's one of my next things to find out. So I also grow incidental food on my own, and when we were doing this now 5 years ago, I had invited everybody to my Second Life home, which has a garden that is similar, has been over the years similar to my Solid Life home garden. I'm going to put into the chat the YouTube video, so I'm not going to really reprise this, but it still has information if people are interested in doing this or learning more on their own. Please look at it again, and then come back and ask questions if you have any questions. So what I had done in 5 years ago was that kind of a pretty flat garden. What I'm intending to do this year, though, is something different, and that is the hugelkultur, which is popularized in Germany and in Eastern Europe, and it's been a practice for a long time. But I am doing this because I have a lot of saplings that have been piling up, cut saplings for 2 years now, and I thought, I'm not going to waste them. I'm going to try this and make a different kind of garden that will give me more grow space in a small area. But this isn't the only kind of thing that you can do. You can do window gardens, you can do terrace gardens, you can do all sorts of creative ways to begin to understand how your food grows and how you can grow at least supplemental things. Stephen, you want to go to the next slide for a minute? And one of the other reasons that I feel it's important to understand more about food and being more careful about food is the graphic on the left side if you're looking at the screen. And that's food waste, the amount of food that is wasted around the world. In the United States, a family spends in excess of $2,000 on food that is not eaten but is wasted. What could you do with an extra $2,000 a year? I could think of a lot of things I could do. And so I've tried not to waste that. Yeah, buy better food is one thing, but the waste of the food has ripples that go all the way back through our economies and other people's economies, because in most of the northern hemisphere, we no longer grow all of our own food that we eat. And so it comes from other countries, and there is use of their land, use of their water, use of transportation, and it goes on and on. So if we can cut down on food waste, it has much more effect than just the money we spend. So how are we going to do that? And I'm going to talk just briefly about the other side of this slide, and that is about food forests. This is another thing that I am experimenting with, not only in my own very small yard, but with a community farm that is educating teenagers from the county in growing and in food. And so a food forest is really much more close to nature's way, where you don't have monoculture growing, where you don't have rows of food, but you have complementary food plants that are suited to the environment. So they may not be native plants, but they are well suited to the environment where we are. And there are other advantages here, and that is that you can do companion planting, that you can do planting where you are ensuring the pollinators that are helpful for the plants you have are attracted to that location, and where the pests are minimized. Not eliminated, but minimized. So this is something that I have been working on slowly in my own small yard and in my community. So I want to ask also if people here, other people, are growing any of their own food or herbs, or what do they grow in a garden, if anything? Yeah, the herbs are pretty easy to grow. Yeah. Tomatoes. I've never had deer eat tomatoes. That's interesting, Stephen. Yeah. Um, one of the things that I have done, because I do have rabbits and squirrels, is plant mint and chives around some of the plants. Because the woodchucks and the rabbits and the squirrels don't happen to like those. Yeah, I've had a rabbit jump up into a raised bed too. Yes. Yep. Yeah. When my kids were little, I had plants, beans and peas and tomatoes right at the backyard, and I would send them out to forage for breakfast. So I'm not going to take up more time now, but I have links to the food forest and to the Google culture, but you can just Google those if you want to have more information about those. And I do invite you to begin to use the skills and talents that you all have in looking at the food that we eat every day. Yeah, question. Sis, yes.
Well, I'll just put it in audio, so I'm going to be speaking anyway. In your first slide, you had a little garden there, and you had different layers, a mulch layer, and so on. Can you explain what those different layers are?
That happens to be the soil, and then the straw, because I was covering and I do this in my solid life as well, cover the more cold hardy plants like the kale, like the parsley, and some of the root vegetables like the carrots with the straw, so that I can keep using those for most of the winter. And then on top of that is the snow. And I will go out at later today, and I will put my hand through the snow and pick out oregano that is still good, and add that to the tomatoes that I cooked and froze in the fall so that I can make pasta sauce tonight.
All right, I'll chime in real quick too to say that while spending not that much time trying to grow herbs, chive, some peppers, that you get a real sense of satisfaction just by having those things to add into food that you're otherwise, buying from the store. And it's also an incentive, as a reminder, to make your own food. If you have some of your own ingredients, you're actually getting engaged in the kitchen. So, Delia, would there be maybe one thing what would be the one thing you would recommend to people wanting to get a start in this type of growing pastime, or maybe what is the best or simplest fruit or practice that you would say how to get started for people?
Well, I guess a couple of things that I would recommend. Tag put in here in the chat mint and thyme. They grow very well outside, but I bring at least one of the thyme inside in a pot in the winter. Keep it in the window and can add that to foods in the winter time. Particularly the cherry tomatoes are very easy to grow. So if you like tomatoes, either in the ground or in a pot, try some cherry tomatoes. And the third thing is that you see people growing avocado trees from seed, but that takes a long time to grow an avocado. But what doesn't take a long time is when you are using your lettuce or your carrots, particularly your lettuce, instead of cutting off and throwing away the bottom, the stem part of the lettuce, cut the leaves off, take the bottom, stick a couple of toothpicks in it, put some water in a mug, put the lettuce bottom into that, and pretty soon you'll have new lettuce leaves.
That sounds great. All right, let's give a quick round of applause for Delia. I will move the screen out of the way. Thank you, Delia. And next up we have Syzygy, who will reprise his celestial orbits talk and give us an update.
Okay, so I hope everyone can hear me clearly enough. Thanks for the invitation to do this. Yeah, hello everyone. It's great to give you this talk again. This is a talk I gave a number of years ago, as you already know. This is basically going to be a very brief summary because I don't have a lot of time to do that, and I'm going to include something new. I'm Syzygy Asymptote here, and William F. Wall, in real life, a retired radio astronomer. I live in the Vancouver area, and here you see me in Pacific Spirit Park in Vancouver, along with some animals which are the figments of the overactive imagination of the photographer. So orbits, they're particularly interesting because you need to understand orbits if you want to understand so many things, like the seasons, the years, the tides, the climate, how do global positioning system work, and it's reshaped our worldwide civilization. How do you understand exoplanets, gravitational waves, space travel? And we're going to be talking a bit about space travel towards the end. If you have huge space colonies, where do you put them? Celestial orbits are important for understanding all those things. So I don't have time to go into all the physics here, but let's talk about the what's called the gravitational potential well. The potential is the potential energy per unit mass for a gravitational field in joules per kilogram. So you can think of a orbiting body as moving around in a sort of a funnel shape here. It would naturally fall into this funnel towards the larger body, the more massive body. Here we're looking at the moon and the Earth, but it's moving sideways fast enough that its acceleration towards the center matches what it would be if it fell straight in. So that's basically how orbits work. It's basically one body's falling around another. You can also think of this as sort of like a centrifugal outward force, which is basically a fictitious force, but that's one way of thinking about it. That was just a two-body case, but of course there are many bodies that are gravitating. Here's the solar system. This represents the horizontal scale, of course, is not correct, but the vertical scale basically is the sun goes down, its potential well goes down, and its potential surface rises as it goes, and it encompasses most of the solar system, or all of the solar system, and there are these little wells along the way of the individual planets and their moons. Jupiter's well is particularly deep. Saturn, its rings are at this point in its well, and so on. But today, this is something new that I didn't talk about last time, which I had hoped to talk about sometime, so I'll talk about it today. So a circular restricted three-body problem. Circular, meaning these are circular orbits. Restricted three-body problem. So basically you have two bodies, and this is a rotating frame. So these two bodies, in this case, is the sun and the earth, but it could be the earth and the moon, or the sun and Jupiter. That would work as well. They're not moving in this rotating frame. And what you see here are the contours representing the gravitational potential, including the centrifugal potential that you have because of rotation. And the question is, what happens if you have another body moving through this potential surface, like a small body, like a restricted, as they call it, restricted body. It's very low mass. It doesn't affect the overall gravitational potential here, like a spaceship or an asteroid. What you find is in this particular potential surface, you have a number of points of equilibrium. These are the Lagrange points or libration points. And if you have a spacecraft coming in here, in this particular surface, you'd have it doing interesting spirograph type shapes, Lissajous figures, but they can be affected by these libration points. This L4 and L5 are stable points, and they can trap things like asteroids and spaceships if they're not moving too fast. But these are what are called metastable points, because if something comes in, L1, L2, and L3, if something comes in, it'll fall in and then it'll be ejected one way or the other. So these are metastable points, which are useful, and they're useful for low fuel maneuvers of spacecraft. One example of that is carried out by Korea and their space agency. Their spacecraft, the Nuri, they took 135 days to get to the moon with this spacecraft. And why did they take so long? Well, if you go from here to the moon, it's a pretty short journey. It's like 3 days normally. But this time, they launched from Earth, and they took this long path, and it came out to this point here. This L1 point, that's the L1 point for the Earth-Sun system. And as I said before, it's metastable, so things tend to fall away from that point. And it comes back towards the Earth-Moon system, traveling like 1.5 million kilometers each way. But when it comes back, it's moving, it's following the moon in its orbit, moving at the same speed as the moon does around the Earth. So it's not moving with respect to the moon, more or less. It's almost zero velocity with respect to the moon, which means it can be captured by the moon. And if it's captured by the moon, you don't need to use your engines to brake. Normally you have to do a braking maneuver to slow down and get captured by the body you're trying to orbit. But in this case, you don't have to, and you save 25% in fuel. So this is a very useful maneuver. And the question is, how can you do this other places? How do you find other fuel-saving routes? Well, there's a sort of a major industry there, astrodynamics, orbital dynamics. But this is a new method. This was published in 2024 about using mathematical knot theory, where you can detect these heteroclinic connections. Heteroclinic means going from one Lagrange point to another, because you're transferring from one orbit to another without using fuel, if you can. In general, this is a tricky problem because orbits are like loops in a 6-dimensional space, because you have at each point in the loop a 3D position vector and a 3D velocity vector. So that's 6 dimensions. And you're trying to go from one orbit to another, one orbital loop to another. But are those orbital loops linked? And this is where knot theory comes in. If you have different loops, are they linked? And you can calculate the linking number, which has to do with the number of crossings and the direction in which they're crossing. And if that linking number is different from 0, then the orbits are linked. And it's possible to have a low energy transfer from one orbit to the next. So here, for example, this is what you'd call this flat surface of the slide is a 2D projection of a 3D slice through a 6D space. And you have two curves, your spacecraft on, say, an unstable curve here, and trying to transfer to a stable curve here. Are they linked? And the linking number is 1, so this is possible. In general, what you're doing is you're looking at, see, tubes of orbits. Basically, orbits that are similar to each other, very close together in this 6-dimensional space, and this is a 2-dimensional slice through it. You see basically these tubes of similar orbits, which are called manifolds, and they're very similar in shape anyway to manifolds you find in cars, for example, car engines, intake manifolds and exhaust manifolds, where you have basically they're transferring air-gas mixtures or exhaust gas from the cylinders or to the cylinders. So here you're transferring celestial objects or spacecraft from one orbit to another or along an orbit. So you want to study these and see if you can find those connections. And you can use knot theory, which is more general. This was applied in the paper to like 3 different cases. If you apply this carefully, they did have a little problem with the Earth and Moon. But in the future, there'll be better methods because we're dealing with a 6-dimensional space, and knot theory actually applies to higher dimensions. So knot theory could be improved. I mean, this barely uses any of the arsenal of knot theory. It's just looking at the linking number in this particular case. But there's so much more to knot theory that could help with this problem, and there are other methods too. Anyway, so that's pretty much what I have to say for the moment. If there are any questions, I should probably look at the chat and see the comments there.
You haven't had a lot of questions. I will say that, have you watched the show The Expanse?
I have indeed, yeah.
Okay, that one scene, I think it was in season 3, where they wanted to try and stealthily get their spaceship down to land on the planet, and they were doing it by taking advantage of basically coasting through the gravity well and then just using their steering thrusters in order to get to the right thing. I thought that was a great explanation of that type of concept.
Yeah, I don't remember that particular scene, but
one other question, I mean, especially since this was in the news lately, what do you think about, and just also the efforts and the technology behind looking for these city killer asteroids?
Well, in general, this is a good idea to check for near-Earth objects, see what happens, and see if they are going to endanger the Earth. I mean, this is a great idea in general, but in specific, what bothers me is that the press tends to sensationalize it. They said, oh, well, it looks like there's a 2% chance that this asteroid is going to hit in 10 years, and well, I mean, those probabilities will be modified over time. But the thing is, then some people start to panic, or maybe they realize that this is the press trying to sell their articles.
Yeah, I think that's one where, of course, if they talked about the confidence intervals and the error bars behind that prediction, the 3% or whatever it was would actually be relatively meaningless, actually.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, Tag mentioned something rather interesting, is that something that's said by Neil Tyson about how funding is being cut for certain programs that are going to be could be very useful. I mean, this is a very useful program. You do want to keep an eye on these near-Earth objects, and you can use, I guess, you can use that sensationalism a bit to keep funding, keep the funding for certain science projects.
Cool. Any questions from the audience? I have one. So this knot theory, I think, did your paper, was that dated 2007, or is the conjunction of knot theory and thinking about orbits something that's even more recent?
This is 2024. The paper was 2024.
Okay, that's great. And is this something that people just hadn't even kind of taken as a perspective on it up to this point, or just somebody got inspired to connect the two?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question as to why hasn't this been done before? I think knot theory is underappreciated. I mean, one person who can speak about this a lot more than I can is Dr. Rob Sharine, who is actually world famous in the mathematical knot community, and he knows. We all know him as Gazimides. He's sitting over there right now. So if we have any questions, Gazimides can answer some questions about knot theory if anyone wants to know. But I think knot theory has a lot of, I mean, he will tell you that there are a lot of applications of knot theory to many different subjects. And applying it to orbital dynamics, I think, is just beginning, as my guess, because I think there's a lot of power in knot theory that has not yet been explored.
Yeah, we had him scheduled as a speaker last fall, but unforeseen circumstances got in the way of that. So we would love to have him. And again, as a reminder, if anybody has an interesting science talk they want to present, just IM me and I'll get you connected on the schedule if you're interested. And if you need help knowing how to do presentations in Second Life, I'll help you out. So if you guys want to hear about knots, say in local chat to encourage Gazimides to get back in touch with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. The great thing about knot theory is there's so many puns, which I would say they're not puns, but
oh God. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, I think I love math, and math that really gets into these multiple dimensions is fascinating. So let's put our hands together, our pixel hands together, give a round of applause for William reminding us and enlightening us. And we'll now go to Tagline, who gave a couple talks. Well, one was a talk, another one was a Q&A on this thing that was a nascent news idea in 2020 called COVID. And I guess the question is, whatever happened with that? Did that ever become a thing? So go ahead, Tagline.
Okay, can you hear me okay? I've just sent out a note card which has my slides for today, and I'm going to bring my little projector forward here. Just a second, I'll be ready to roll. And down. I guess you could see, I raised it up so you could see that the nurse was looking at you. You may need to zoom in on this more to see. The note card has a link to a PDF on my Google Drive of the slides I'm going to show. I'm going to have more information here than I'm going to cover, but this is the way I do. And I always think if people are more interested or want to see the details a little bit more carefully, then it's good to have some material to look at. I put a point of information on this first slide. As of the 13th of April 2024, the I guess a World Tracker, I think it was called, the coronavirus tracker was no longer updated after that point. And most countries had really quit keeping records and reporting records. Just to flash back a bit, Worldometer, I think it was just a nice resource, and especially when there was question about the validity or forthcomingness of certain governments, including the United States. But if you look here, clicked it, daily new cases over the years of the pandemic. I remember the good old days when America was great, and you would have Thanksgiving, and then a surge in new cases, and Christmas, New Year's, a surge in new cases, Easter, 4th of July, surges in new cases, as people got fatigued and uncooperative, and there were what I consider nefarious players passing disinformation and exploiting the frustrations. But this whole thing, I'll just tell you my point of view is if you were on the side of a mountain and, tapped in with nails hanging there, resting, and you just got sick of it, you don't step off into the air. You don't give up or you're done. So these are new cases. Here are deaths. Pretty sorry situation. Massive deaths, really, before around May of 2022. Part of that was because of better treatments becoming available. I'm going to cover those particularly as fast as I can here. Massachusetts is a pretty responsible government, I think. And no government is perfect, but if, everybody talks about how terrible democracy is, but I like the way Churchill pointed, try some of the others and see what you think. You might feel like democracy ain't so bad. Here's a Worldometer statistics. United States was number one in total cases and deaths. There were over 7 million people on the planet documented to have died from this. And even now there are people that'll say these people didn't really die, they died of natural causes and that sort of thing. But that's just disingenuous to my thinking in medical terms. So it's remarkable that a country that considers itself wealthy and exceptional did so poorly in a public health measures. Okay, one thing I covered in the time of the this original presentation was on the 1st of February, and there really wasn't a pandemic yet, but a few weeks to a month or so, and it really was a pandemic. Basic reproduction number is just if one person is sick, on average, how many other people will get sick. That is quite useful in planning, but you have to get that really early in the course of an infectious process. And more used, really, because it's more chance to get it, is the effective reproduction number, where you see at a given time if a person goes out among others and is infected, how many people will get infected on average. And so that can change. The basic reproduction number, theoretically, that's a fixed number. It's a measurement into the beginning of a pandemic. The effective reproduction number changes and can be affected by the deaths of susceptible people and herd immunity, if that happens, and other things, vaccinations. I thought it was interesting to just show this real quickly, basic reproduction number of all these different things. Right now in Texas, the great People's Republic of Texas, there is an outbreak of measles. And because I think there's probably resistance to and a movement against vaccinations there. and it's bleeding into New Mexico, last I read, and it will spread to wherever there are susceptible people. This is just absolutely ridiculous to me. Measles is highly infectious, and it causes deafness, can cause encephalitis, death, all kinds of messes. Right. You look at SARS-CoV-2, which was the coronavirus that caused COVID-19. That's not anywhere near the top of the list. But it caused a number of things that would wipe people out. I put in numbers for bird flu, H5N1 bird flu, which is not that greatly different from the COVID-19 virus, but a little bit less of a basic reproduction number. But if you have a reproduction number greater than 1, it will spread. If it's 1 or less, it won't. You're getting fewer cases than the person that's the index case, so it doesn't become a pandemic. Okay, let me fly through this. Baltimore, David Baltimore came up with what's called the Baltimore classification of viruses, which is, I think, the most intelligent way to sort out viruses, although there's a lot of morphology-based descriptions that is important. In this case, SARS-CoV-2 is a class 4 single-stranded RNA, positive sense, meaning it gets into the cytosol and is able to be translated straight away by the RNA equipment of the cell, of the host cell. And one of the things you see, especially with pictures of these, are spiked, they're spike proteins, which are the attachment proteins on the surface of this viron, and it's also an enveloped entity, which it probably inherits the envelope from the host cell as it is killing it, and that helps its stealth. Okay, there's a picture with some of these little virons on infected cells. And just a point about people say, oh, I got immunity now. Well, immunity doesn't last very long. The vaccinations, it's a question if they are very effective after 6 months. They're generally thought not to be. And also you get rapid change in strains when this was up and running, this pandemic. So the interesting thing is that severe reinfections often follow severe first infections. So people have a terrible first infection, or maybe a mild one. They can still get a severe reinfection that could do them some real harm. Key points in general management of this as a layperson: if you feel you're likely to get very sick, which means you're at risk, and I'll tell you what those risk factors are. Things that could reduce your risk of hospitalization or death would be not to delay, get treatment with medications generally within 5 to 7 days after you first have symptoms. I'll point out also you are infectious with COVID-19 for days before you get symptoms quite often. So you can go around infecting other people, not know it. Testing for COVID-19 is it's an extraordinary tool to have available for the public, and I think it helps people that are responsible, not so selfish, but responsible mentality to try to prevent others, strangers as well as grandma, or their newborn child, or their new nephew from getting this disease. And although theoretically younger people would tolerate it better, but not always. There were young people that died of this disease as well. Really should be still alive if this hadn't happened. So medications can be prescribed within 5 to 7 days. So one really important point, if you don't have a healthcare provider, when I retired, I practiced medicine. I was involved in medicine training and practice for 40 years, or maybe a little longer. And I couldn't get a doctor because I had Medicare. And there were no doctors that would take me. I would make an appointment, and they would cancel it and say, we don't take Medicare, or we're not taking new patients now. And that happened for a good while. I had a friend who's an internist who got me in with one of her colleagues who otherwise would have turned me away. But it's a business. So if you don't have a healthcare provider, you go to the pharmacy. If not, the pharmacists are trained in generally decent human beings, and they'll try to help you. Community health centers and health departments are really important, and we hope these, a lot of times they depend on funding from all kinds of sources, including federal government. We hope that these are not utterly destroyed with the American government in the coming years. Let's see, I'm trying to advance my slide. There we go. Okay, the biggest advance, it was extraordinary, some of the advances that came in. The Netherlands is quite a good system. I mean, I saw a thing about what's the difference between a Canadian and an American. Syzygy, you could answer if you have any thing contrary to say about this, but the answer was a Canadian is a North American who isn't heavily armed, who has health care. So anyway, Paxlovid, it's a mixed drug. It has two different components, and I won't go into the detail too much. It'll be something you can look at with the PDF, as I don't want to go too long here. But it inhibits a crucial enzyme that's transcribed from the RNA genome of the virus that's required. It's basically a enzymatic scissors for cutting up these polycystic proteins that are produced. This is a single strand, about 30,000 bases connected, RNA bases. And it is a pretty amazing thing that it works so well, because you'd think a single strand of long RNA strand like that would tend to make a lot of mistakes, but there are ways that it proofreads itself. We talked about that back in 2020. I'm sure you remember. This one enzyme is absolutely critical for this virus to be able to cut its polyproteins into functional units. So it provided a really excellent target. So much was learned by high-quality scientific research about the structure and mechanisms of function and the biochemistry and the molecular biology of these entities, and the physiology of what happens, how they take over a cell and kill it, kind of like a bad election. Well, Paxlovid comes in 2 doses. There's a lower dose for people with renal impairment. If somebody has severe renal impairment, they're generally not recommended for it. If they've got severe liver disease, limited liver function, they're not recommended for it. And pregnancy and breastfeeding, I think, are kind of off the table. And also, just for preventative effects because somebody had exposure. You don't use it for that. But if somebody has mild to moderate COVID for 5 days or less, but has some high-risk factors, which include just being 50 or older, and health conditions like pulmonary disease, glucose intolerance, obesity, almost any of these things that we have as almost epidemic of what used to be just seen in old age in America, at least. There are other medications that are antiviral, such Ligavrio, I guess is the way it's pronounced. This is a new one to me, but it's a competitor for Paxlovid and seemed to be more effective for some, although Paxlovid seemed to be particularly useful for older adults, and also just really useful to have an oral medication you can take. Then you have some that are intravenous, for intravenous use. That would be used generally in a hospital or in a closely monitored outpatient setting where you're seeing a patient every day. And nucleotide analogs that interfere with the virus's ability to reproduce itself. This particular one's prodrug means it gets processed and becomes activated by, I think by liver function. Cytokines, just to mention, cytokines are small secreted proteins that can set you on fire, but you absolutely need them. Remember the movie Denzel Washington, Man on Fire? That's what you turn into if they get cytokines out of control. There are different cytokines. It's kind of a loose term. I have them listed here. Interleukin cytokines, especially interleukin 6, is of interest here. And I threw in an article's diagram about some of the interactions of origins and interactions of things in the cytokine network. Here's the thing that we talked about. This is what killed a lot of people, cytokine storms. That's where the person kind of gets on fire inside. It gets destroyed by their own immune system, their own inflammatory response. And it can, if they survive it, they can end up with pulmonary fibrosis and crippled pulmonary function. Acute respiratory distress syndrome. I've seen many cases of that over the years. And that was particularly common with and came on quickly with COVID-19. Basically, when you look at it, it's an easy read with the radiologist. The lungs are whited out. They're stiff. They're non-compliant. You need the respiratory support with positive pressure for the lungs to expand. And these are really worth avoiding. And then to better manage these cytokine storms, you have medications that are generally immunosuppressant, or like this very interesting recombinant humanized anti-human monoclonal antibody, meaning it attacks. Okay, thank you. I'll wrap it up here. I'm almost done. It attacks sites involved in production of interleukin 6, the cytokine, and at one of the enzymes involved in production of that. And it's taken from rat or murine, rat or mouse antibodies, and they are restructured to make them reasonably human in its appearance to the body's immune system. So this is the other one that I came across. So I have no experience in use of these, and I'm not an infectious disease type person, but I know enough of basic science to share this with you. And I do know about taking care of people with on ventilators and that sort of thing. I did a lot of work in ICUs over the years, earlier especially. And what a tragedy this was. Preventable? No. It's going to happen. It may be starting to happen already. It may be out there coming at us right now. And are we ready? Are we ready to deal with it now? Have we learned a great deal? I don't think so. I think that we've been exploited for our frailty and our biases and the things we wish were true. So I want to leave you with this picture of a daughter saying goodbye to her mother.
All right, thanks, Robert. I'll try and swing a little bit of a positiveness from what I've seen from this. Our response to it is that while vaccines are clearly a very economical, widespread way to deal with pandemics, the fact that lots of different drugs, in some cases some that were repurposed from other prior pathologies, is something that, some people don't accept vaccination, but they will accept a pill. So it seems like the messaging, there's something encouraging in that, right? That there are more opportunities and ways to deal with that. If you want to comment on that. Then I have one question from the audience, and then we can probably close up.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that. Could you ask the question again?
Yeah, just that the fact that a lot of people who are anti-vax were still willing to accept these pills that are effective, although in some cases some that were, pranks.
Not effective, yeah.
That there were plenty that were worse. So there are opportunities for us to message more people getting treatment to help with the pandemic, right?
Yeah, but the fact remains, I have no question about this, that let's see, it flipped over here, I'm sorry, that people that are vaccinated and subsequently get whatever their physical condition is, on whole, you're going to have a few situations with any intervention of any sort that in a large number of people, you're going to have a few people that are going to have problems. They're going to have untoward effects. That can happen with food. That can happen with taking a car ride. I mean, that's just the way life is, and people don't know how to sort it. People don't understand exponential mathematics, and they don't understand statistics and risk-benefit. And I wish politicians understood risk-benefit more and thought about risk-benefit in terms of making decisions rather than their risk of getting primaried if they go against their party. But vaccinations protect people from death or severe disease. That's my answer.
Yeah. So let me take the question I got from the audience, which was this came in and said, in your opinion, could we really have done much better in the aggregate? It seemed like most people eventually got COVID, though the questioner did not. And so what would you say about how could we do better? What would be your specific sets of advice for governments and people to make a response better next time?
First off, I think that having qualified scientific expertise and judgment to run the public health issues is needed, not politicians. And transparency and honesty about the numbers that are emerging. For instance, we learned later how nursing homes became COVID slaughterhouses. There were a lot of things that could have been handled better. And if people had also been just more in reality, less in denial, and willing to just pay attention and cooperate. I'm not saying you have to line up to get on the bus like you would in Frankfurt, Germany, but, as the kind of a stereotype. But, you know, cooperation allows for great things to be achieved, including keeping people alive. But people were just too childish and selfish. I think there was having over 1.2 million people die in the United States was unconscionable, was an unacceptable failure. And if people had observed, I think that masks are, and especially with the higher grade masks, that the N95 masks were a useful measure to reduce the atomization of cough, and it didn't protect you necessarily so much from other people. It kept your germs from getting out there. Just like in the old tuberculosis wards, the people who had the tuberculosis were the ones who should wear the masks. You would see people with TB coughing and other people wearing the masks and hoping not to get it. But social distancing, washing of hands, all those things, and you just had so many people, including law enforcement people, who, if you said, "Why aren't you wearing a mask?" or, you know, doing this or that, and they'd say, I'm immune, you know, and they just had such stubborn attitudes. I don't know how you make people smarter. That's how we could have done better.
Yeah, I don't know how to make people smarter either, but one thing the Science Circle is trying to do, and we get help from experts like yourself, is to be out there, be ready to answer questions for people, try and give opportunities for people to learn about the facts of things from experts, actual professionals. And so with that, let's everyone give Tagline applause, and thanks for helping come out and volunteering today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to have been invited. Thank you very much.
All right, and I think since we're a little past time, let's just officially give another round of applause for all of our panelists. Look forward for more panel discussions and other presentations for the rest of spring. Keep an eye on the events calendar at Science Circle. And I want to thank everyone for having come and participated, and have a great weekend.